Ah, Christmas. The most wonderful time of the year. If your definition of wonderful includes family arguments, reheated sprouts, and being emotionally mugged by your own mother while Cliff Richard plays softly in the background. I'd just landed back in the UK, which is already bleak enough without throwing emotional trauma into the mix. 10 years serving overseas, sand, sweat, shrapnel, you name it. And not that I was expecting a parade, or even one of those cringy homemade banners that say, "Welcome home. Hero." But were clearly printed at the local Tesco. Express. No, I would have settled for a bloody cup of tea. Instead, I got off the train at Euston to rain, regret, and a pigeon that genuinely looked like it wanted to square up. My spine's dodgy. My right leg clicks when I walk. And the air smelled like bin juice and disappointment. Merry sodding Christmas. And there she was. Mum. Standing outside the house like she'd just stepped out of a Waitrose ad. All smug in her M&S coat and that weird tight-lipped smile. She does when she's actively suppressing the urge to slap someone. She didn't hug me. Of course she didn't. She looked at me like I'd dragged a corpse into the hallway. Not so much welcome back, love, as why are you here ruining my vibe? Inside, the house looked exactly the same as when I left. Same dusty fake holly on the mantelpiece. Same passive-aggressive Christmas tree, the kind with tinsel that screams, "This'll do," and a sad blinking angel that's seen things. Like really seen things. She handed me a lukewarm mince pie from a packet. Mind you, not even warmed up in the oven. Just the sad, chewy kind that tastes like regret and cheap cloves. And then she said it, not quite yet the big one. Not the "you're a burden" line, that's coming. But something like, "Well, you look tired." Which for the uninitiated is British mum code for, "You look awful. Why are you ruining Christmas with your face? No, how are you? No, thank you for I don't know. Risking life and limb in a desert. So you could still buy 3 for 2, fairy lights at Sainsbury's. Just you look tired." I sat down at the dinner table, leg cramping, back screaming, across from my brother, who's been living in Mum's spare room for 7 years now. He's the sort who thinks mental health is a myth invented by millennials, and unironically says things like, "I nearly joined the army once, actually." "Sure you did, mate. Nearly joined, nearly got a haircut. Nearly moved out. Nearly everything except actually doing it." Dinner kicked off. Classic British festive chaos. Dry turkey, microwaved veg, and tension so thick you could spread it on toast. Mum brought out the gravy like she was unveiling a Fabergé egg, and the whole thing had that unmistakable air of forced merriment. Crackers no one laughs at, someone making passive digs about Brexit, and me slowly realizing I should have stayed in Kabul. Then, in between me trying not to cry into a parsnip, it happened. She put her fork down, looked me square in the face, and with all the warmth of a tax inspector said, "You're a burden. Get out of this house." Just like that, overstuffing. No lead up, no warning shot. Just 5 words that sliced through the turkey-induced stupor and left the table in silence, except for the sound of Aunt Carol, inhaling sharply through her teeth, like someone just farted in church. And you know what the worst part was? No one said anything. Not a word. My brother blinked. Aunt Carol sipped her wine, like she was watching a particularly tense episode of Corey. Nan fiddled with her hearing aid. Might have actually turned it off. I, on the other hand, just sat there thinking, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. 10 years, 3 deployments, 4 surgeries, and I get booted from Christmas. Dinner like a toddler who's thrown peas at the dog. No coat, no cab fare, no sense of self-worth. Just me, a Tesco carrier bag with some duty-free biscuits, and the crushing realization that the only person happy to see me home was probably my gran, and she only calls me when she can't reach the tea bags. So I left, out the front door, past the twinkling fairy lights and the plastic reindeer. That's been missing a nose since 2009, and I swear, even the inflatable Santa gave me a sympathetic look as I limped down the street like a bootleg Tiny Tim. Now, if you've never experienced a full-blown character, assassination between the pigs in blankets and the after-eights, allow me to set the scene. The turkey was dry. Not bit overdone dry. I'm talking sandpaper on the soul dry. The kind of dry that makes you question every life decision that led you to chewing on this bird. Carcass like it owed you money. The sprouts? Overcooked into oblivion. Absolutely dead inside. Much like the mood. Mum, meanwhile, was in full festive form. You know the type. All smiles and seething contempt. like Nigella Lawson possessed by unresolved trauma. She'd already made 3 jabs about how the army had changed me, said bloody foreigners under her breath when the EastEnders special came on, and loudly noted that the dog didn't recognize me, which, frankly, was mutual. And then, right when I thought we might make it to pudding without a total character. Assassination, she struck. Put down her knife and fork like she was delivering the Sermon on the Mount, looked me dead in the face across the table, and said, full volume, no warning, no dramatic build-up. You're a burden. Get out of this house. Right there, at Christmas dinner, in front of Aunt Carol, who, and I swear on my grandmother's gravy boat, nodded, as if I'd just sneezed on the roast, not, sacrificed my 20s, my health, and my bloody lumbar spine sending her $200 a month from a literal war zone. I just sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, holding a limp Yorkshire pudding like it was going to protect me. Spoiler, it did not. Let's pause. Because what exactly do you say to that? What is the correct social response to being told? You're a burden while you're still chewing stuffing balls? Oh, sorry, Mom. Shall I finish my roast outside then? The table went dead quiet, except for Uncle Dave chewing, because nothing short of a nuclear blast would stop him from finishing his gammon. No one said anything, not even my brother, who at that point was 3 ciders in and quietly trying to Google how to join the French Foreign Legion. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a hiss. It was a statement, delivered with the same tone of voice she used when asking me to take the bins out as a teenager. Like this was just another Thursday night in emotional hell. And what absolutely sent me was Aunt Carol's reaction. That tiny, self-satisfied nod. Like this was all perfectly reasonable. Like Mum had just said, the potatoes are a bit bland, and not. You are a financial, emotional, and logistical drain on my life, and I want you to vanish into the night like a wounded Victorian orphan. Honestly, I think the turkey had more emotional support than I did at that table. It wasn't even an argument. No build-up. No shouting. No plates thrown. Just a quiet, brutal, you're a burden. Get out! As if she was kicking a neighbor off her driveway, not ejecting her son from the family home on the one day we're all meant to pretend we like each other. And the wildest part? She went straight back to carving the ham. Didn't even blink. Like ruining your child's entire sense of self-worth was just part of the prep work. Somewhere between glazing the carrots and burning the stuffing. I looked around the table like, is this actually happening? Nan avoided eye contact. My brother coughed into his napkin. The dog farted and left the room. Honestly, same. And I just sat there thinking, brilliant. Bloody brilliant. Came home to surprise them. Ended up surprise evicted. On Christmas Day, with indigestion. So yeah, I stood up. Didn't say anything. Didn't throw a scene. Just picked up my coat. Still had the price tag on because I bought it at Heathrow. Grabbed my bag and walked out. Because when your own mother tells you, in Dolby surround sound, that you're a burden, there's not really a lot left to discuss over trifle, is there? So, I walked out. No coat, no plan. No backup turkey leg for the road. Just me, my dignity in free fall, and a suspiciously festive Tesco carrier bag holding a half-eaten box of Turkish Delight, a novelty mug that said "World's Okayest Soldier," and a pair of socks that smelled faintly of despair. It was cold. Not brisk walk in the park cold. I mean, my ears have detached themselves from my skull and gone to live somewhere warmer, cold. And of course it had started raining. Because why wouldn't it? Of course it had. Not a nice cinematic drizzle either. I'm talking horizontal. Stinging, face-slapping rain that felt personal. Like even the weather had beef. And me? I was out here looking like the ghost of bad life choices. Trudging down the pavement in formal shoes that were absolutely not built for puddles. Or trauma. I didn't cry. Which, frankly, is a miracle, considering I'd just been publicly disowned in front of a roast dinner. But I think I was too stunned to feel anything other than pure, caffeinated humiliation, like my soul had been punched in the throat. So what do you do when your own mum tells you you're a burden? You do what every emotionally repressed Brit does. You get the bus. And not just any bus. The night bus. The N-sodding 89 to God knows where, which smells like old kebab, broken dreams, and Lynx Africa applied with a fire extinguisher. I got on, dripping wet, shivering, carrying a suitcase that wheeled like it had arthritis. Driver looked at me like I'd just escaped from a Channel 5 drama. Sat near the back. Not right at the back. That's reserved for teenagers who vape aggressively and talk about who shagged who behind. Little, but close enough to soak up the misery without making eye contact. There was a man in a Santa hat snoring 3 seats down. a woman eating Wotsits out of her cleavage, a teenage couple arguing about whether they were on a break or not. Real festive cheer, and there I was, the ghost of Christmas banished, clutching my Tesco bag like it contained the Ark of the Covenant, trying not to sob into a packet of Parma violets I found in my pocket. The bus jolted. My suitcase toppled. Someone tutted. And I just sat there, staring out the window, watching the city blur past like I was in the tragic bit of a Channel 4 drama narrated by Olivia Colman. And I thought, brilliant. Just bloody brilliant. I survived a decade in literal war zones, only to be felled by a Yorkshire pudding and some deeply entrenched maternal loathing. It's funny, isn't it? You can be strong, trained, disciplined, patched up with titanium and military-grade grit. And it still takes one person, 5 words, and a dining table full of cowards to absolutely ruin you. No call, no apology, not even a text from Mum saying, "Come back inside before you get hypothermia and ruin the Queen's speech." Nothing. Just me. A broken body, a borrowed umbrella, cheers. Neighbor Janet, wherever you are, and a bus seat that smelled like regret and Red Bull. Destination? My Nans. Because if there's one person left in the universe who might still see me as more than a mistake in military boots, it's her. I didn't even know if she'd be awake. Didn't know if she'd be in. Didn't even know if she wanted to see me. But in that moment, between the emotional wreckage and the smell of someone's late-night chips, I thought, better Nan's spare room than Mum's emotional gulag. So I sat there, clinging to my suitcase like it was a life raft, watching the streetlights flicker, thinking about what I'd say if she answered the door, and more importantly, what I'd do if she didn't. Now, I don't know if you've ever been emotionally exiled on Christmas Day and found yourself traveling to your Nan's in the dead of night, like some tragic reverse Santa. But I can assure you it's a vibe. Grandma's farm, my last remaining option, my emotional Hail Mary. No Wi-Fi, no heating unless you count the ancient aga that smells faintly of regret and Bovril. No central anything. Really, just sheep, spite, and whatever's still lurking in the pantry from 1997. It's less rustic countryside retreat, and more, you may die of exposure if you stand still too long. But she was safe. Safe-ish. The last adult in my life who didn't look at me like I was something scraped off a shoe outside Greg's. She made terrible stew, hoarded jam jars for reasons no one understands, and could silence an entire room with just a sigh. But she cared. Or at least didn't actively wish me dead. I clung to that. So there I was, on what must have been the last functioning bus of the apocalypse, bumping along country lanes with a driver who looked like he'd long since given up the will to live, muttering to himself about potholes and the Labor Party. I sat in the back, still damp from the previous emotional waterboarding, clutching my suitcase like it contained the meaning of life. Spoiler, it did not. It contained pants, a packet of hula hoops, and the distinct smell of lost hope. Every bump in the road rattled through my spine like a bitter little reminder. You could have stayed abroad. You could have been sunburnt, traumatized and underpaid. But at least your mother wouldn't be there shouting you out the door like you'd nicked the family silver. But no, I came back for Christmas, like a mug. And so I sat there, face pressed against the freezing window, practicing what I was going to say to Nan like I was auditioning for the lead in Tragic Grandchild, the West Midlands tour. Hi, Nan, Merry Christmas. Sorry for arriving unannounced at midnight like a Victorian orphan with emotional baggage and mild frostbite. Or, it's me, your disappointment in combat trousers. Mind if I collapse in your hallway for a bit? Or my personal favorite. Hi, Nan. Everyone hates me. Got any tea and a mild sense of purpose? Because how do you even start that conversation? You don't. You just show up like a damp problem and hope she doesn't send you straight back down the lane with a flapjack and a warning about foxes. The bus eventually wheezed to a stop in the middle of nowhere. Proper nowhere. No lights, no sounds. Just dark, wind, and the haunting realization that I was now officially one missed step away from becoming a tragic local news story. I got off, dragging my suitcase through the mud like a defeated contestant on The Apprentice. Countryside edition. The wheels immediately gave up. Not that they'd been helpful at any point since London. My trainers squelched. My dignity remained in the bus, probably curled up next to a crisp packet and an empty WKD bottle. It was a 20-minute walk to Nan's front door. In the pitch black, with only the sheep watching, silently judging. They always judge. I don't trust sheep. Never have. But finally, I saw it. That crooked little cottage, slightly off kilter like it too, had suffered through several emotional breakdowns and one aggressive roof leak. The curtains were drawn. The porch light flickered, more out of stubbornness than electricity. And there, beyond the garden gate held shut with a bootlace and sheer defiance, was the one place I hadn't yet been told I was a burden. Yet, I walked up the path, stood outside the door, took a breath, told myself not to cry, which obviously made me cry harder. Then I knocked, because sometimes, when the whole world's kicked you in the teeth, all you can do is knock on a door and hope the person behind it still remembers you as something other than a massive, embarrassing mistake. So, there I was, on Nan's doorstep, dripping slightly, smelling like regret and public transport upholstery, having just been booted out of my own bloody family home on Christmas Day. Dignity? Gone. Hope? Flickering like the dodgy porch light. Emotional stability? Hanging on by a thread in one wet sock. And then the door creaked open. Not dramatically, not even fully. Just enough for the cold air to hiss mistake at me as it escaped past her slippers. And there she was. My Nan. The woman, the myth, the passive-aggressive legend. Wrapped in a floral dressing gown that had clearly outlived several prime ministers, with curlers jammed into her thinning gray hair like tiny angry question marks. Smelt faintly of parsnips and authority. She looked at me. Not, oh, there's my beloved grandchild looked at me. No, this was, are you selling something or confessing a murder? Levels of suspicion. Proper laser beam eyes. Like she could see straight into the inner workings of my soul, which, at that point, resembled a collapsed tent at a rainy festival. I opened my mouth, ready to launch into my carefully rehearsed monologue of misery, But before I could even say, "Hi Nan, Merry Christmas. My life's gone full EastEnders and I've got nowhere else to go," she hit me with it. 5 words. 5 tiny syllables that shattered me like a Tesco wine glass under a stiletto heel. "Have you brought the potatoes?" The potatoes. Not "come in, love." Not "are you all right?" Not even "Jesus wept. What happened to your face?" Nope, just "have you brought the potatoes?" Like I just popped round from the corner shop. Like I wasn't emotionally bleeding out on her welcome mat. Like I was scheduled. Like I was the bloody Deliveroo of root vegetables. I blinked. Because what else do you do when your entire soul's just been flattened by a pensioner asking about produce? I honestly thought I'd hallucinated it. Maybe the trauma had reached my ears. Maybe "have you brought the potatoes?" was grief speak for "come in, I love you. I'll make tea and pat your head till the pain stops." Spoiler, it wasn't. She stepped aside. Didn't ask me to come in. Just moved her slipper an inch to the left, like technically I could enter, but she wasn't going to endorse it with her whole chest. So I shuffled past her. A war veteran. A broken human. A potatoless disgrace. And as I stood in her hallway, dripping onto the linoleum and staring at a framed cross-stitch that said, "Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Cheers for that. Nan." All I could think was, this woman terrifies me, and I love her with every shattered molecule of my body. Because that's the thing about Nan. She won't coddle you. She won't stroke your hair and whisper affirmations like a therapy app on trial mode, but she will put the kettle on. She will give you the good blanket. She will heat up a tin of beans like she's staging a Michelin comeback tour. And she will eventually, after you've removed your soggy shoes and pretended not to cry into a slice of Battenberg, ask what happened, in her own way, usually starting with, "So your mother's still a cow then?" But in that moment, standing there like a rejected contestant from X. Factor, Christmas Tragedy Edition, clutching a suitcase full of nothing. All I had was, "Have you brought the potatoes?" And honestly, it broke me. But not in the way Mum's "you're a burden" did. That was sharp and cruel and laced with venom. Nan's version? It was stupid, soft, human, utterly unhelpful, and somehow exactly what I needed. Because sometimes you don't need a hug. You need someone to expect potatoes, like your existence still fits into their world. Like you haven't ruined it all beyond repair, even if you are empty-handed. Right then, at precisely 7:42 p.m., wearing one shoe, clutching a suitcase that smelled suspiciously of despair and Lynx Africa, I realized something. Something bleak. Something cosmic. Something that hits harder than your ex. Getting engaged to a mortgage advisor named Simon. I was utterly, cosmically alone. And worse, still on bloody spud duty. No hug, no "oh love, what happened to your leg?" Not even a raised eyebrow of emotional investment. Just Nan, looking genuinely distressed. Not over me, but over the possible absence of Maris bloody pipers. Because heaven forbid the roast should suffer, just because her grandson's been emotionally ejected from his own family like a sad little crouton at a wedding buffet. She marched into the kitchen in her slipper socks, like the ghost of stoicism itself, muttering, "Well, we can't have roast without potatoes. Not at Christmas. What are we, animals?" And there I stood, in the hallway, staring at a faded picture of Jesus next to the electricity meter, thinking, wow, I could literally be bleeding from the soul, and this woman's worried about her mash being lumpy, which, to be fair, it always is. She mashes like she's trying to punish the spuds for past mistakes. I dragged myself into the kitchen, still limping from whatever creative new nerve, damage I'd acquired on Mum's patio. And there it was, the battlefield. Tupperware stacked like a Jenga tower of sadness, a turkey that looked more dehydrated than me, and a gravy boat so old it probably remembers rationing. She looked over her shoulder, wooden spoon in hand, and asked, "How's your mother, still dramatic?" Like that was the issue, not the public verbal assassination, not the fact that I was now squatting in her kitchen like a Dickens character with trauma. And me? I just sort of nodded. Because what do you say to that? Yes, Nan. She screamed I was a burden, disowned me, and tried to erase me like I was a bad episode of EastEnders. But sure, let's call it dramatic. Instead, I muttered something unintelligible, like, and sat down next to the cat, who looked at me like I'd interrupted her PhD in indifference. Meanwhile, Nan went full command mode. She opened the cupboard, pulled out a pack of Smash Instant Mash, and said, "Well, this'll have to do. It's not ideal, but neither's divorce, and we still had to get on with it." Right, cool. So my life's imploding? My mum's just exorcised me like a Victorian demon, and now I'm emotionally being compared to powdered F-seeking potatoes. And I wish I could tell you I had a big epiphany then, that I rose up, declared my boundaries, reclaimed my self-worth, and strode into 2026 a new person. But no, I sat there in my damp socks, holding a mug of tea so strong it could file for citizenship, and helped Nan stir reconstituted sadness into a saucepan. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like therapy and empowerment. Sometimes it looks like being aggressively ignored by your grandmother, while Call the Midwife plays in the background and you wonder if anyone, anywhere ever brought the bloody potatoes. Eventually, after enough awkward silence to fill a BBC drama, Nan decided I could stay. Not because she was overcome with emotion, God no. More like she realized the bins were already full, and I wasn't biodegradable. My grand welcome? 2 slightly sweaty quality streets, both green triangle, naturally, and a Yorkshire pudding with a center that was, let's just say, mysteriously meaty. Could have been beef, could have been badger, could have been a 1970s mystery meat product that's developed sentience. I ate it anyway because emotional rock bottom doesn't come with a menu. Then she looked at me, not with compassion, not with pity, but with the sort of utilitarian coldness you usually reserve for IKEA, instructions or dealing with customer service. And she said without flinching, "You'll have to go in the attic. The dog sleeps in the spare room now." Right, course, because naturally, the dog, who, I might add, gets a heated blanket and an oat milk nightcap, outranks me in the housing hierarchy. So up I go, creaky stairs, one slipper, full emotional trauma hanging off me like a damp hoodie. The attic, a frostbitten oubliette, where old junk goes to die and feelings go to ferment. There's no heating, no carpet, just one manky tartan blanket and the haunting echo of life choices. And there, in the corner, was Colin, a mouse, a small, judgy, gingerbread crust-hoarding rodent who locked eyes with me like I'd just walked in on him mid-therapy. Did he run? No. Did he blink? Absolutely not. He just stared, like even he was embarrassed for me. We shared a moment, Colin and I. 2 broken souls, trapped in a loft, wondering how it came to this. Him, probably just trying to survive winter. Me, emotionally evicted by my mum and spiritually disintegrating under an old suitcase in a broken globe from 1982. And as I lay there, fully clothed, because hypothermia was not off the table, I realized this was my life now. No job, no flat, no heating, just Colin, a lumpy blanket, and a draft so aggressive it felt like God, personally exhaling disappointment through the roof tiles. At one point, I tried to talk to him. Not proud of that. I just whispered, "You think she keeps the good biscuits downstairs?" Colin didn't answer, just chewed something noisily, probably my dignity. Eventually, I gave up pretending. I was a human being and drifted off to sleep, like a Victorian child with consumption, curled up under half a curtain and the faint smell of Dettol. And I swear, just before I passed out, I heard Colin sigh. Like even he couldn't believe I'd ended up here. Morning came like a slap with a damp flannel, gray, slightly too cold and deeply unnecessary. The attic light flicked on. No warning. Just full interrogation mode. Colin the mouse had already cleared off. Probably couldn't handle the emotional weight of another shared sunrise. And there she was. Nan. In her quilted housecoat of doom and slippers that have survived 3 recessions and 1 divorce. No good morning, no how did you sleep, sweetheart. Just a mug thrust at my face and 5 words that could start wars. You always were dramatic. Right. Because being abandoned, emotionally and physically qualifies as a mild flair for theater. Apparently. Sure, Nan. Maybe next time I'll sob more quietly while being booted out by my own mother. The tea was strong enough to kickstart a tractor, bless her. Not even sugar, just vibes and tannins. It was the kind of brew that says, I love you, but I will never say it out loud. And I hope this scalding liquid makes up for all the therapy you'll need later. She handed me a vegetable peeler like it was a weapon in an emotional Cold War, pointed at the pile of parsnips and said, Christmas doesn't prep itself. No apology. Not even a sorry about the attic. Or hope Colin didn't try and bite your soul. Just back to business, as if I hadn't spent the night spooning shame under a leaky roof. But here's the thing. Somewhere between peeling slightly phallic root veg and being insulted in ways so subtle they'd win BAFTAs, I started to feel marginally less invisible. Not better, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but less like a discarded pub coaster and more like someone who maybe, just maybe, mattered enough to be passive-aggressively tolerated. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't want the story. She just made space at the counter, handed me a second cup of tea, progress, and critiqued my peeling technique like it was a MasterChef final. You're gouging it. What are you, emotionally unstable and inefficient? Yes, Nan, yes I am. But thanks for noticing. We didn't talk about the screaming, or Mum, or the emotional carnage, now folded neatly into the back of my skull like a cursed Christmas jumper. We talked about the turkey being dry, and how the vicar's wife's new hair made her look bit too pleased with herself. It wasn't a Hallmark moment. There was no breakthrough, no violins, just sarcastic banter over boiled sprouts, and the gentle clatter of cutlery as two emotionally constipated Brits avoided vulnerability at all costs. But I didn't feel entirely alone. I felt bruised, definitely. Hollowed out, sure, but not discarded. She passed me the gravy boat and said, Don't get used to this. I'm not a bleeding counselor, which in Nan speak is practically a hug. So, Mum called, which in this family is basically a biblical event. You know, like a plague or a rain of frogs. Something you know is coming eventually, but still somehow manages to ruin your dinner. Anyway, I didn't answer, because I was busy, emotionally unavailable, spiritually depleted, and also halfway through Nan's roast potatoes, which, frankly, are the only consistent love I've ever known. But she left a voicemail. Oh, did she leave a voicemail? The kind of message that deserves its own BAFTA for best performance in denial. It started off casual, like we hadn't both screamed ourselves hoarse 3 days ago, over turkey basters and unresolved childhood trauma. Hiya, love. Just wondering where you've got to? Where I've got to? Like I've popped out to Greg's and got lost in the steak bake aisle for a week. Then came the emotional hit and run. It's just, I was having a bad day. Everyone's so on edge this time of year. I didn't mean to shout. Oh, well, in that case, never mind the emotional eviction or the small matter of being yeeted out the door like expired milk. She didn't mean it. Guess I'll just knit myself a blanket out of emotional resilience and crack on. Yeah? And then the pièce de résistance. You know I love you. Ah, yes, the classic. The British mum's get-out-of-jail-free card. Say it with just enough frost to sound like a contractual obligation, and we'll all pretend the trauma was actually a touching Christmas special. I stared at the phone like it had insulted my intelligence, or my roast, or both. Because let's be clear, I didn't ignore her to be petty. I didn't sit there, surrounded by Yorkshire puddings and passive-aggressive parsnip steam, planning a long game of emotional revenge. I just didn't want to. For the first time, I chose peace, not closure, not forgiveness, just a quiet room with no shouting. A cup of tea I didn't have to earn. A Nan who shows affection via roast beef and character assassination. And silence, and that sweet, rare kind where no one's telling me I'm too sensitive, or dramatic, or a bloody disappointment with that face on again. I didn't call her back. Not because I hate her, not because I'm trying to win, but because I needed to sit in a space where love wasn't a guilt-laced landmine wrapped in a voicemail. And also, let's be honest, if you think I'm missing, Nan's gravy just to relive a psychological TED talk from the woman who weaponizes mince pies, you've clearly never been to Christmas in this family. So here it is, the moral, if there even is one. Because frankly, trying to find meaning in British family, Christmas is like trying to win an argument with a Daily Mail. Comment section's exhausting, pointless, and you'll probably cry in a Tesco car park after. But alright, I'll give it a go. Sometimes your family breaks you. Not in a dramatic, EastEnders drumroll sort of way, no. In that slow, casual, deeply British way, where they undermine your entire personality between mouthfuls of stuffing, and don't even pause the telly to do it. A passive-aggressive dismantling of your soul with a smile and a side of parsnips. And sometimes, they hand you a bowl of potatoes like nothing happened. No apology, no explanation. Just, here, mash these. As if the emotional arson they committed the night before was just character development. And you know what? That's the bit no one warns you about. That healing doesn't look like some Pinterest quote in a fancy font. It's not some grand epiphany where your mum hugs you, says she's sorry, and you all go ice skating like it's a John Lewis advert. Nah, healing is scrubbing a gravy pan while someone criticizes your technique and tells you you're doing it wrong. As usual, healing is deeply unsexy. It's awkward silences, weird half-jokes, and accepting that your Nan will never say, I love you, but she will aggressively knit you a scarf and call you soft for crying at EastEnders. Because trauma? Apparently seasonal. It peaks around December, like the flu and emotional flashbacks. 1 minute you're unwrapping Lynx Africa, the next you're reevaluating your self-worth, because someone said you've always been sensitive in that tone that's somehow both insulting and nostalgic. And here's what I've learned. If someone ever tells you you're a burden over roast dinner, don't argue. Don't sit there trying to prove you're not a problem with a sprout halfway down your throat. Just take the bloody bus, find your gran, crawl into the attic, make friends with Colin the mouse. He's got boundaries and a better emotional intelligence than half the family tree, because sometimes peace doesn't come wrapped in closure. Sometimes it comes in the form of a slightly damp blanket, a cuppa so strong it could resuscitate a corpse, and an unspoken agreement that while no one's going to say sorry, they did save you the best roasty. So yeah, that's the story. No neat bow, no forgiveness montage. Just me, a battered heart, one rodent roommate, and the slow, petty miracle of surviving another family Christmas. God bless us, everyone, except Uncle Dave. He voted Tory and still calls TikTok the devil's telly. Cheers.